Okay, so I'm back working on my 2002 Mazda Tribute, and hopefully we're going to be stopping all the oil leaks on here. And just to recap, we replaced the oil pan gasket, we've done the valve cover gaskets, and we've also replaced the front crank seal, but we still got leaks, and it's coming from the front timing cover. So I don't think it's going to be too bad doing this. I'm going to show you the kit. This is what I've got, and this is supposed to have all the little gaskets and stuff we need. We're probably going to be using some RTV as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at this kit. Okay, so we've got a couple of these little funky seals, and this one, and then we've also got another crank seal. May or may not mess with that because I've done that recently, and then we got a couple more little O-rings in there. So we're going to go ahead and just get started. Okay, so the first thing I'm done is I got my jack over here. We're going to get this lifted up in a minute. I've got a 3/4. It works the best on my lugs. We're going to get these broken loose, and we're going to lift it up and get a jack stand under here. Okay, so I've got a couple of forms of support. I've got some blocks here on the frame, and we got a jack stand up here, and we got our wheel just shoved back there for now. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do, because we're going to be taking this mount and stuff up here loose, we're going to get some blocks, and we're going to carefully position them under here, and we'll get a jack and we'll lift this up just slightly over here or over here, and we'll get the blocks positioned under it so it's going to be nice tight. That way when we take this up here loose, it's not going to drop down a whole lot. Now it does have 3 other mounts, the center, front and back, and one on the transmission, so it's not going to go far, but that's just to support it. Okay, I've just carefully lifted right over here on the edge of this oil pan, just a little bit, and then we position the blocks just like that. So now we're ready to go ahead, move the jack, and we'll get started up here and removing all this stuff. Okay, so the first thing we're going to remove, because it's going to make it easier to get to things, we're going to take this overflow bottle. Got a 10mm on a stud there. Got another one over here. We'll go ahead and get those loose, and we're just going to move this over kind of out of the way. Okay, that one doesn't need to come off because this will lift up. Now we are going to have a sensor down under there, and we got this little wire here. So we're going to lift this up, pop the little wires out, and unclip your sensor here. Okay, this connector, you're going to need a pick tool on both sides. You're going to have to go underneath and pull up on these tabs right here carefully and not break this. It's kind of hard to get it, but you got to get one side at a time basically. Kind of get that one loose, and then we'll go to the other side and do the same. Okay, and then we can just fold this over out of the way. Let me just show you this connector again. See, you got these tabs. You got to get a pick tool on both sides because they're on both sides, and pull up one side, pull it a little bit, and then pop the other side, and then finish pulling it off so you don't break it. Okay, now as you can see, we'll go down here. We got another 10mm. I'm going to go ahead and take that loose because these lines are right over the top of where this mount is. Now also on top of that, you come down here, and there's a couple more 10mm, those two right down there, and we have to take those loose so we're able to get the slack to move these lines around and kind of get them out of our way, because they're off. See how this line that's running underneath is connected to that line, so we got to get these two and then that 10mm. So we're going to take those 3 loose. And I'm just using a little 1/4-inch drive extension for this, and just making it easier. It's probably about a 2-foot extension. Okay, and just to show you, with those loose, they can now be lifted up off the studs, and see, I can move that back and get to that 13mm now. So I think the first thing we're going to do is just get on these 18s on this mount. Got 2 bolts. We got a wire running to this with an 18 nut, and then we got 2 nuts on the studs underneath, and we got an 18 bolt right over here. So we're going to go ahead and work on taking those loose. Okay, so I'm just starting on these back over here on the engine. Loosening the bolts up. I'm going to move over here to these studs. So this one here just has the wire. Just don't forget where that goes. Let's put that back out of the way. Now we're going to get on the studs here. And it may move a little bit, but it's not going to go far. It's not going to go out of alignment. You got 3 other mounts. I'm just going to loosen them all up at once. Don't know how tight yours is going to be. These are coming pretty easy. Said if you don't want to forget where things go, put the bolts back if you can as you're taking things loose, so you don't have any bolts just laying around wondering what they go to. So now we're going to finish getting these here. Back here. These are all pretty loose. Right. There's the bolt. So now I'm just going to go ahead and finish removing this studded one here. Okay, right up here we got a 10mm that we need to get out that's bracing this line, power steering line. I got my 10mm. We can just pull that up. Okay, now this is loose. We just need to kind of wiggle it out of here. We got a line right here that it wants to hang up on for this power steering reservoir. Alright. Okay, so there we have it. Okay, and I put all my nuts and bolts back on here so those are not getting misplaced. Okay, the next thing we're going to be dealing with is this tensioner down here. You can see what you're going to need is one of these long flat bars. They work pretty good. Or if you don't have one of these, you could use a ratchet, but you're going to need a cheater pipe because this is really stout. It does not move easily. You want to make sure to get that on there real good. We're just going to pop it off up here at the power steering pulley. Okay, so you can see I'm just pulling it back towards the front of the vehicle, and then I'm going to pop that belt off of there. Okay, so the belt is off, and we'll just go ahead and at this point completely remove it. This belt I'm going to be replacing, I imagine, because it's oil soaked, but right now I'm just wrapping it down under that tensioner there, but I still want to get it out of the way because the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take this power steering hose loose right here. We're going to get a drain pan under here. We're going to start draining out this reservoir, and matter of fact, just to get this thing completely out of my way, we're going to take these two 10mm out here, and we're just going to completely get it out of the way. No sense in it being up here, this hose in the way and stuff. So that's the next thing we're going to do. We're going to get a drain pan down underneath the engine here, and go ahead and take this loose, and we'll get it draining. Okay, now go ahead and inspect your hose that's running from here, because this one here I'm actually going to be replacing. It's cracking along this side over here. I'll show you when I take it out. But anyways, I'm using a pry bar. We're going to push that. We're going to kind of push it up and off there. We'll get in here and get at it. Just be careful with your bolts and stuff, and don't damage anything or your threads. But that's all I'm doing. Okay, so we got that draining down in that pan there, and we're just going to let that drain a little for a second. I'm going to go ahead and start working on these two 10mm over here. We're just going to take this pump here out of the way. Actually, we got another line. Because we got that other line, I think I'm just going to disconnect it right here. Said I'm going to be replacing this hose anyway, so yeah, I'm just going to leave it and disconnect it right here. Okay, that hose is out of the way. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 13s. We got 3 of them on this mount. I'll go ahead and take those 3 loose and just remove this mount here. I'm going to use a long extension. Okay, so here's my setup here. Just got a long extension to go in there and get those on the front and the back. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take this out of here. Got those bolts out of the way. And that just clears up the space so we can get in here and get this pump here next. Okay, so this high pressure line here, I'm going to take an 18, and you can hold this right here too with a crescent. That'll keep you from bending it. So you'll want to, one second. Okay, so as you're breaking this loose, you'll want to have a crescent on that part while you're turning this counterclockwise. You want to hold that with your other hand, basically, so you won't be bending your pipe and stuff there. So we're going to go ahead, and this is coming pretty easy. Now there's another part that actually attaches to the pump as well, but you don't need to remove that unless you're replacing your pump. So I'm just going to finish unscrewing that 18, and then we'll take this high pressure line, we'll just fold it back over here somewhere out of the way. Get it off out of the way. Yeah, we'll have some more dripping going on there, but that's okay. Oh, we got our connector here. Squeeze in on these tabs on both sides. Squeeze those both in and then pull that off. Okay, I just laid that up there, just kind of went back under this cruise control here and laid it back up there out of the way. So we got that loose. The next thing we're going to do is focus on getting the pulley off. Okay, what I've got here, it's just an 11mm socket. You could probably find anything, but I'm going in here. You can see that like counter bore where that 10mm is. Well, I'm just going in here and setting that in there. It fits nice and snug. You may have something that might even fit better. I don't know. You can. This end seems to fit a little better too, but something just to put in there, just to keep this from rotating, is all we're doing. So just set that in there, and then you can come down. This is going to be pretty snug, so you'll want to get you probably a cheater bar or something. Now you can take this off without removing it here, but it's just easier to get to the tins with this bolt and pulley off, or nut rather. Okay, so I got that loose. Said yours may be much tighter. I have went in and replaced this thing before though. Now we can take that out. That basically just holds it still for us. And now you should be able just to wiggle it. It's just splined. But we should be able just to wiggle it off there. But you definitely don't want to get too rough with it. Alright, so it's not. Let me get my screwdriver or something here, because it's not wanting to come loose. Okay, I'm just going to take the screwdriver and just come in behind it and gently rock it, because it's just a little bit stuck. Okay, there we go. It didn't take much. It was a little bit stuck on those splines. And you can see that it's got splines. Go down on that spline shaft there. So now we just got, basically, we've got like 6 of these 10mm running around here. Some of them are inside the counter bores, but we got 6 of them running around. So, and we also got 2 13mm right there up at the top of this bracket. So we're going to remove those 2 13s, and we're going to get those 6 10mm, and then this whole piece will just come out, and then we'll go from there. Okay, and there's those 2 13s that come out of the very top of that bracket. Okay, now we've got all these little 10mm out, and we just throw them over here, and we can reach in here at this point, and this whole housing bracket will remove off of the studs. Now it's likely to still have more fluid in it, so we're going to get it on the pan here, but you can see there's the studded, the 6 studded bolts that go through the timing cover. So we're going to have to remove each one of those in order, and those are 13s. So we're gonna go ahead and just get on those next, since we're here at this. Okay, so we just got a 13 on my little slim ratchet, and we're just going to get on these studs, start breaking them loose, and got that first one loose. So there that is. So we just got 6 or 5 more of those, and we'll have at least this part right here off. Okay, so we got all 6 of those out of there, and that's got that part loose. So like I said, we got to get some other things off. The next thing we're going to get on is this tensioner, and we're going to remove it. You're going to need a little slim ratchet. This is what I'm using. And I'm going to get a little 10 millimeter on there. So you just need something slim, otherwise you're going to have to jack or raise your engine to get that out. So I'm going to work on that. And you got just enough clearance just to get that bolt out. Okay, I've got it loose with my little slim ratchet. I'm just working it with my fingers here with a socket. Okay, so I've got that out of there. That came out pretty easy. I said yours may be a little more difficult, but there's the tensioner. Okay, the next thing I want to do is remove this bolt here on the crank pulley. Now I'm using an impact to break this loose. If you don't have one, you'd have to hold that pulley still with another tool or something. And I have heard of people using the starter. You disable your fuel, your spark to be safe, and just gently bump the starter over while you got a long bar supported and wedged. So, and it doesn't take much just to break it loose. We're going to go ahead and use the impact here and get this loose. Okay, so you're going to need a puller kit ideally, and these are going to be metric bolts that you need, about 2.5 inch length or so. And this tool right here, we're going to place that on. These are M8 1.25s. Okay, and I have removed this crank pulley before, so what I had to do is like spray this down with like some lubricant, and I'd run I believe it's the M8 1.25 tap through there. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what these are. But I know it's an M8. But I ran it through there and just kind of cleaned the threads up because they do get rusty. But this is what we're going to be doing, is placing this on here and figuring out how we can get this rigged up basically. And then we're going to get our other part to this tool on here. We're just going to get these 3 into place, and we'll just, now you could screw these bolts down if you had something behind them. It's because it's going to hit the front cover, but you want to be careful. But you could push it off here just by using the bolts, because they're going to hit against that cover. But you'd want to put something like a thin piece of metal behind it so it doesn't damage the front cover. But if you absolutely didn't have the puller, you could do that and push it off there, but you'd want to be careful as to not damage your front cover there. So I'm just going to finish fastening these down. Okay, those are threaded as far as they'll go, and we got this part and then this piece. Basically, we're going to put this piece underneath here, behind this, into that part of the shaft. And then we're just going to thread this right through here. Okay, so now I got my 19. We're just going to get on this and just start turning this, tightening it. And you may have to hold this if it tries to spin on you too much, but once it starts moving, it doesn't take a lot to get it pulled off of here. And these bolts are just tightened down evenly. They don't go all the way down. It's basically just something for it to pull against. And I could use my impact for this as well if I wanted to, but it's not very difficult. And it's got a keyway on there, so when we put it back, it will just go right back into place. Okay, and it's getting a lot easier here now. You just want to make sure you get your bolts threaded all the way down through the threads where you got plenty of the bolts holding. and said yours may be a little bit more difficult to remove if it hasn't been removed before. Okay, and there we are. We're just going to pull the whole thing off here, but you can see how that just pulls against that as you're tightening it, and this part goes down and hits against that. So we'll just set this aside, and here's the little keyway under here. You can see that, and that goes into this, so that lines that up. So we got that out. We may go ahead at this point and just take these bolts that we have down here. We got a few coming through the pan here on the bottom. So we got some 13s, we got some 10 millimeters. We've got one sensor right here that we need to unclip. It's really stuck there, but we need to get in there and get that. So you can see we don't have a lot down here. We're going to go ahead and work on these bolts. Okay, so we're going to work on these 10 millimeters right here. We did get that wire connector loose. We got one more like up here I'm going to have to get to. Right, we've got two more 13s running through the pan right here. Now I did, when the last time I sealed this pan, because I didn't like the idea of the gaskets failing, I used RTV on both sides of this, and I'm going to have to slightly break this part loose in this area. I'll have to take a putty knife and get that loose. Not the part on the pan, but the upper part. So that's going to take a little doing. So there's those two bolts. And so I'll kind of get that loose. Looks like I've got another 10 right here as well. But what we'll do when we put it back, we'll just put the RTV and we'll set it down onto it, and it'll reseal just fine. So all this leakage is coming from up and around the seal, and it's the most of it is on this back side that's leaking as well. Okay, so just to show you a little bit here, so we got another 13 right there as well. We've got another 10 right up here, but you can see where all this leakage is coming from. It's leaking around this cover, and it's just pouring down here and running down this, and then it's winding up right down on the exhaust and just keeping it saturated. So we also have got a bolt that's on this bracket where the alternator's at, and you can see there's a 10 right there, and we're going to have to get that out because that's coming through that bracket and going into that cover. You can see it's going right into that, so we got to get that loose. So we're going to take that little 10 out, and then we're going to come up here and we're going to get that 13 and get that 10 right there, and the others will probably get from the top. Okay, so I've got the little studded 13 over here. I got that out. And we've got, I believe, well, I've got a few more up there. But I've got the 10s that were going up. I went ahead and got them all while I was over here because they're pretty easy to get from just down here. Now, we've got pretty much most everything loose except for the valve covers. Now right here, this wire unclips, and then there's a 10 right here. We're going to go ahead and remove that, and then we're going to get to this 10 that's right there, going back in behind that. Okay, and with that wire off there, we've got the 10 millimeter stud right there. We're going to go ahead and remove that studded bolt. Okay, so I've got the majority, I've got all the bolts here. I got this one behind this. Got the bolts around the perimeter. I think I may, most of them up through there. So I'm going to take, at this point, I take a putty knife and I'm just going to break that silicone or RTV on that top layer there. And so I'll just have to RTV it back. And then I'm going to go up top. We're going to work on the valve covers. We're just going to take them loose, and we're just going to pull them back a little bit because it's going to make it easier when putting this back into place. Okay, so I'm going to get the 8s out of here, whatever size they are, and I'm going to get this shroud off of here first. Okay, now I could probably get away with taking the first bolts out of place, but the problem is when I go to put this cover back, I'm going to have to RTV the bottom. It's going to be way too difficult trying to fit this into place, so I'm just going to take the valve covers completely loose and just kind of pull them back over just a little bit, kind of leave it where it's covering it, but pull it back a little bit. Now also, the only other bad thing, I'm going to have to take this intake loose, and we've got all of these 8 millimeters, and we've got this over here for the EGR. It's got to come loose, so we've got to get all this pulled back and get these different connections and the hoses and all this stuff, just like you'd do if you were doing your intake. And we'll need to also remove this here so we can get the throttle housing out. Now probably, since I'm going to be removing a lot of electrical stuff, we'll go ahead and take our negative cable loose before we get started on this. Okay, so I'm just getting this piece out of here first and just disconnected these. Okay, we need to get these throttles, just pull, unclip that one, and then just get this one here, flip it out. Just like that. And then we'll come up here and we'll take these. Actually, we can probably leave that. You can just push these back through here, push in on the clips. Okay, so we can leave that bracket. I think we'll go ahead and just take that one there loose though, that 8 millimeter. Okay, so I'm just going to go through here and get all of these 8 millimeters, and we've got some back here, back here. I'm going to get all these loose, and then we'll finish disconnecting the hoses in the back. And I've already changed these gaskets once, but if you haven't done yours, while you're at this, you probably want to get you some intake gaskets and at least replace these uppers. got a few more back here that's in the back that's a little bit harder to see. Okay. Okay. Okay, I did have one more right there. So as you can see, we've got these 8 or 10 rather, or 9. Okay, so we got all those loose. And now it will move. So we're going to go ahead. We've got some clips we need to pop loose on here. And sometimes these will break. They're brittle. Okay, we've got the hoses. We need to get our pliers over here and get these loose. For this one, looks like we're missing a bolt right here. It's supposed to have one there. We're going to take this loose. We're going to take these bolts here loose just to not disturb this gasket here. And then I'll just kind of pull this back this way and pull it out. But so we've got this. It's got a wire connector on it, some vacuum. I could just probably disconnect the wire and the vacuum there and not completely remove that if I wanted to. But we've just got the 2 8mm, same here. You want to get you an extension to remove those. Then we've got the plug for our throttle housing here. Want to get that loose, get the idle loose, and so that should be it. Once we get these 2 here, you just take those 8mm out and get these loose, and then the 2 hoses back here, and we should be able to get it. I'm trying to think if we had a bracket back here, but I don't think so. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and looks like we've got everything else. We want to cover this up so we don't drop anything down in our intake. Alright, so I'm just getting ready to remove this. I got all the hoses and the EGR and everything. I'm just kind of coming out. I've got actually one hose over here I forgot by the throttle housing. Give me 1 second. Okay, so this I had to squeeze, disconnect, forgot about it. And also this transmission tube kind of loops up here onto this and needs to be removed. It's the vent. So I believe we've got everything. And we're gonna just label these so there's no confusion on where these coil packs. We're going to completely remove those coil packs, and we'll label them as to where they go. Same for back there, just so there's no confusion about putting it back. But so it's not too hard to remove that. From this point, we're just going to get these bolts out of our valve covers, get our coil packs out, and we'll get those bolts removed. Shouldn't have any trouble getting to them. We'll loosen them up. Now I do have a little bit of RTV that I'll have to replace because I put in various places where it met up with sections where it needed some, so I'll have to put that back when I put the valve covers back. But as far as getting this into place, these really need to come off. The only other option is that I'd have to remove the oil pan, and I really don't want to do that. Okay, I'm about ready to get the valve covers up. I got the coil packs, just marked them and stuck them out of the way. And I've got a little sensor over here that's, I'm going to take an 8mm, take that up, mark it as to where it goes, and then we're going to go ahead and just start taking the bolts and stuff out of the valve covers. We're going to pop them up and just slide them over a little bit, just so they're going to be out of the way. And then we're almost ready to start removing. Looks like we got another sensor right here that I got to get and mark. But other than that, it looks like I think we've got all the bolts out. And it's just a matter of just getting the valve cover bolts loose before we can go ahead and pop it off of here, because there's nothing left holding it. And we can work on getting it cleaned up and getting the new seals on there. So we're going to go ahead, just get all the bolts loose on the valve covers at this point, and then we're just going to move those back. Okay, so we got the first one off. I'm just going to cover this up with a clean rag or towel for now, actually. And here's the valve cover. These are still in good shape, as I replaced them probably not even a year ago. You can see where the RTV has to go, so I have to clean this off. See, this is where there's a junction between these two pieces. So if you don't put RTV, then you'll get a leak, and it'll just leak like you wouldn't believe. And then the same thing up here. When I reseat it, I've got a junction down here and right here. So we scrape that off, and we put some clean RTV, and then we just slap the valve cover back down. All these are new, and these are in good shape and doing their job. So anyways, we're going to cover this up so we don't get any debris in here. Put a clean rag on it, and then we're going to get to work on that back one. So these weren't too bad. The ones down here are a little bit more difficult to get to, but you can kind of come through here and then just reach down around and get to it and move this hose around. But we've about got it. I've got one more bolt right here, that 13 that I have not got. I'm going to get that loose, and then get that rear valve cover loose, and this should be ready to come off of here. Okay, we got most all of them loose back here. Hasn't been a whole lot of trouble, with the exception of this one in the back. I'm using an extension and kind of getting back there. It was kind of tight, and that dryer's in the way, so I took the little nuts off the studs on the dryer and just kind of moved it over a little bit to get to that one in the back there. It's the only one I've been having trouble with. But other than that, the rest of them are loose, and we're getting ready to pop that one off. We'll cover it up, and with that, we should be able to ready to start popping this front cover off of here pretty soon. And we're going to get the new gaskets on it. Probably going to slap a little RTV for good measure, and may as well go ahead and put that new seal on there, I guess, since I've got one with the kit. And hopefully we'll get it back on there this evening. Okay, and there we are with the back one off. Said it really wasn't as difficult as the front, just the exception of that rear bolt. Is back up in here. That was the hardest one to get to, just because the dryer is right in the way there. As far as these gaskets have come up real easy. I only had a few spots. See, on this one back here, the only place the silicone goes is up on the front of the timing cover. So we got that off there. Everything is loose. With that, there's a little bit of silicone maybe still on the bottom of the oil pan. We're going to start trying to just pop this off of here though at this point. Okay, I wanted to show you the next thing I've been working on here. There are 3 bolts that hold this alternator, and I kind of reached in through here, and then I also come from the top to get the 3 bolts. But if you look back up here, there's a bracket, and we have some more bolts that are right in there. If you can see that. We got a 10mm that's going through into that cover. So I had to get the 3 bolts out of the alternator, and we just pulled it. We pulled it right up through the top here, basically. And I'm going to work on getting that final 10mm that's going through this bracket that holds the alternator. And I believe that is it, because I've checked everything else. Okay, I wanted to explain something very important when removing this. Now, this is the bracket that the alternator fastens to, and this is the bracket that goes to the engine. You got a bolt here, and you got 2 bolts coming in to this front cover. Now, I'd remove the bolts. However, there's locating pegs, as you can see here and here, and those will hold on to that front cover. So you have to either remove it or loosen, at the very least, loosen this bolt up, because they will hold on to it. Now, first I didn't know what it was hanging up on, so you need to remove the alternator and this bracket. As you can see, it's really loose now. There are some locating pegs for the front cover as well. So when you have these and the locating peg on the front cover, it simply will not move unless you have this completely removed. So I'm getting ready to try to work this out of here. Okay, to remove this, all I've done is just tilted it at an angle and just dropped it right down out the bottom here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to clean this up. We'll put our new front seal on, which will be pretty easy because all we have to do is knock it out. Now, you want to be careful and don't damage your facing, but we'll just knock this out, and we'll go ahead and get all this cleaned up and get our gaskets and stuff on. Okay, so here's our new seal sitting next to these old ones here, and just wanted to take a look at these to figure out, exactly why they failed so badly. But surprisingly, I was expecting these to be more hardened and like plastic-like. That's usually the way these old little seals will do, but they're still got a lot of elasticity and stuff to them. So let's take a closer look. Okay, so with a closer inspection, you can see how these are much more narrow, so flattened out. So basically, the part that is supposed to be sticking up and has the point there has completely flattened out over time, so it's not doing anything. And the oil pan was exactly the same way. I said they're still elastic, but you can tell how much thinner that is that way. So it's just not doing any good whatsoever. And this is the one that goes into the center there. So all of these are looking the same. I said just much more narrow, doesn't have that beveled part there. It's just wore down over time. As you can see the difference there. So anyways, we're going to get the front cover cleaned up. We'll pop our new crank seal in, and then we'll get these into place. There's a few places I'll show you where we're going to have to put the RTV, because there's some junctions with the engine block there that you have to have that. I don't know if I'd talked about this seal kit earlier. This was only like $25 for this whole kit here, by the way. And I got this from AutoZone. I really have used Fel Pro a lot, and I trust their gaskets pretty good. Okay, we got this supported just on some wood blocks here. We're going to go ahead and just knock this out. Okay, now this one hasn't been on here long, but we're going to, since we've got a new one, we're going to go ahead and replace it. It shouldn't take a lot to knock this out. We'll see. I'm just using just an extension. There we go. Okay, so we're going to get some purple cleaner, and I've got a little pan over here that I'm going to get this in. We're just going to scrub this thing up, or a little tub rather, just a little wash tub, and I'm going to use some purple cleaner. You can just spray it on there and it'll eat that stuff off pretty quick, but you want to make sure to rinse that purple cleaner off because it will eat aluminum up. You just leave it on there. But we're going to get this cleaned up, and hopefully we're going to get the face of the engine. We're going to have to clean that up with some brake cleaner or something to get it wiped down real good, because we're going to be putting the RTV. So we want to make absolutely sure that both of these surfaces are clean. Okay, I've been working on the surfaces of the engine here, and we just been cleaning this up as clean as we can get it. And the main thing is to get the areas where you can see where the junctions are for the heads and the block. Get those as clean as you can, because you're going to have to put the RTV there. And so you got them on both sides. And then going down to the pan, we've cleaned up the whole face. We've also cleaned this really well, because we want to make sure that when we put the RTV, it's going to seal back here. Now, if something happens here, I can come back and deal with it, but as long as I get the RTV in these junctions, you can see them down here as well, here, and then the one for the cylinder heads. So you got the bed plates and everything, and then this gasket here. Now, normally you would only need to worry about this junction right here, but since I've took this whole thing off, I'm going to be sealing the whole entire surface, putting a thin layer of RTV and in this area of this corner, and then at each of the junction points we'll put a little thin layer before we go to putting this front cover back. And be careful, this will try to move out of place on you, but it's got a keyway there. But anyway, that's all we're going to do, and we're going to work on getting this front cover back on here. I do have to put the crank seal back in, and I'll show you that. Okay, I underestimated the amount of time it was going to take to clean this up, but we finally got it clean on both sides real good. We're getting ready to slap these seals on here. Right, so the bevel, you know, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's going to go up, and the little square indentions will go into their spot. And so this one's quite a bit thicker, as I can tell, so when it gets snugged up, it's actually going to do some good. Now, I would suspect that this seal, with it being new, could probably even seal off the junction spots, but just as a rule of thumb, you always have to put the RTV in those places because it can leak. And I've just seen just a tiny variation in junctions, and it caused a tremendous leak. So we're going to get this one, say, bevel side up. So the grease and stuff is really caked on this thing because it's been doing it for the life of the vehicle. and I even had cleaned it off, but you couldn't hardly tell it by the looks of it. So down here, like I said, we're going to put the RTV thin bead and then also a thin bead on the oil pan, and then we'll put the RTV on the engine block where the junctions are. We will put it at the various places. Okay, and you can see, you know, the difference. See how that's sticking up there. So when we snug this down, this gasket is going to seal that off. So the other one was down flush. And I noticed, for whatever reason, this rear one was leaking the worst. So this area here, and it seemed to be like kind of down in this area where it was just pouring out. Okay, I'm getting ready to pop this seal on. I do have it setting on this part, not my gaskets, but I probably should have popped that on first. And if I can, I usually just use a block of wood. Just get it going even. Get it down flush. Alright, so we got that nice and flush there. And we're going to take and put some clean motor oil before we slip that crank in there. Make sure to oil that. Okay, and it come a little rain here too. I had to tarp it over. But I'm getting ready to start on. I've gave this another wipe down, and you see the junctions right here. We're going to be putting little dabs, and we're going to put a thin layer on this and on the because we want to make sure that that's sealed really good along through here, and then all the other junctions up through there. So this is where it gets a little messy. I've got some ultra black, but we're going to go ahead and start getting this on. Okay, so as you see, I put the little dabs. It doesn't take a lot at the junction points. A little front, back. And then I come down, and then we've got a little bit here, and in here we made sure to put plenty on this where it meets up with the pan. And so we've got our cover ready. We're going to go ahead and careful. We're going to have to go back up through here again, and then we've got the alignment pegs. You can see right there on each side. You got the alignment peg. We're going to get it lined up with that, slip it into place. Now the way I like to do it is I'm going to let this set up for 24 hours before I go to torquing it down. It's just the way I like to do it. I don't want any of this stuff gushing out and going anywhere. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll come back after it's set up and I'll torque this down tomorrow. Okay, I've come up through the bottom. I've got it gently set into place. And try not to squish and make a mess here. And I've got it on its pegs here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to gently push it in and get it into place. And we'll just get like a few screws, the bolts started, and we're going to let it set up. Okay, so I've just used a couple of these studs to pull it down. Is all I've done. I think that one takes a different one right there, but this is going to work for now. But anyways, we've got it pulled down. I think I'm going to go ahead. You can see how this stuff is kind of squishing out, and which that was expected. The main thing is I want it to seal off. We're going to go ahead at this point and just finish putting the rest of the studded bolts and stuff, and we do have those cleaned up. I've been having them soaking in gasoline to clean them up a little bit, but I'm going to kind of, I think I know where all the studs go, but I may have to swap a few around because I know all these holding the power steering pump down here were all studded. So we're going to get those in. I know those are studded. The majority of them were studded bolts, and it's kind of going to be the process of elimination because without going back and looking, I don't remember exactly where each and every one was at. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and just get the bolts in loosely, let them set up. Now, once we get that done, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing up here. Once we got this pulled up, I'm going to go ahead and set the valve cover with a little dab here, so that can be setting up, I think. And we'll torque them kind of all at the same time. But I like to let that RTV set up for about 24 hours. So, and really, I hate to leave it uncovered anymore because I did get a rain. I had to tarp it over, so I'm going to go ahead and just do that. I'm not tightening them down. I'm just kind of putting them in there loosely and just barely snugging them down with my little 1/4-inch ratchet for now. And we'll come back and we'll give it the final torque after it's set up. Okay, so we got the bolts all back in the front cover. I just want to show you what I did. We got the ones in the pan there. You see these two. And I was just checking the studs, which one needed the studs, by putting the wire up there. But you got one there, and you got one up at the very top up there as well. You can see that. And you got this little 10mm stud. Those are just 10s. See, there's another stud right up there, and that's for this wire clip. Now I'm just getting ready to set this first valve cover. Again, we're just putting dabs of the silicone at the junction place for the water pump and this front cover, and we're going to go ahead, just wiped it down. We're going to set this first valve cover, and we'll just do the same thing back there, the dabs of RTV, and we're going to let this set up. Come back tomorrow and we'll torque everything down, inch-pounds. Okay, before I torque the valve covers and front cover, I'm also going to take the time and go ahead and replace these lower intakes. I know I had done the uppers the last time I'd messed with this, but I didn't get a hold of the lower. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take these 8mm that are holding the intake, and we're just going to try to pick the whole unit up and fold it back over here with the wires and everything, and then we'll just work those gaskets underneath, and hopefully without disconnecting any of the harness or the fuel line there. I can do it, but I really don't want to if I don't have to. So I'm going to be working on that for a minute. Really cold and windy out here today. And this is the kit I got. It come with, you know, the uppers and lowers, so I'm just going to replace both. It was like $20 for the whole kit, so I'm just going to go ahead and replace them both at the same time. Okay, I want to say this thing had really glued itself down, so I got it loose now, but I had to take and just gently with a screwdriver and pop this loose. It was just almost just, I thought it was still bolted down. It was so hard to move and didn't want to move, but I just gently broke it loose on both sides. Now we got it where we can go ahead and try to pull it up. I know I still got some wires connected. Maybe I can pull it back. Okay, here's our little intake. I've just twisted this around where I can get to it. Still, there's a sensor that's hard to get to down under there as well. Just clean this surface up really good, and it was really dirty. I had to vacuum it and then wipe it down real good and clean the surface up. Just getting ready to swap these here over, and you can see where some of them were leaking, looks like, but then some weren't. Okay, so the intake are back, the gaskets are back on, and those are definitely really hardened and brittle. I hope y'all are able to hear anything today because the wind is blowing like crazy out here. But I'm getting ready just to get this set back into place, and I did pop another PCV valve on there as well. So we're getting ready to get that in place, and then we'll probably work on maybe getting the alternator bracket on. Okay, we're going to be tightening these to 89 inch-pounds. If you're not using an inch-pound, use a 1/4 inch ratchet, and even at that, do not get carried away with these little bolts. Okay, now we're going to switch gears and get on replacing this alternator bracket. We got the locating pins are going to go in that front cover, and the bolts are going to go in, the 3 bolts. And I'm going to figure out, these are the bolts that I have. They were all the same, but some of them had threads all the way up. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and work on getting that into place. So this bracket and alternator is not real fun without removing some more stuff out of the way, but I'm getting these first 2 just coming through here with a little ratchet wrench and a small ratchet, and I'm getting ready. I got one more at the back. I'm going to go fill back there and get that one into place, and then I'm just going to tighten them up just as best I can from here, and then we can work on getting the alternator back into place. We also got this wire, but I think I'm going to leave it until I get this alternator back positioned. Okay, so as far as tightening those 3 bolts that go in there, weren't very difficult. I don't know if you can see all those, but anyway, you can see the lower one. I just used this one to get the upper and the rear, and then right here where I don't have any much clearance, I just used a regular 10mm wrench and got them real snug. So that's good to go, and we're ready to go ahead and get our alternator back into place. And it's just going to we're going to hook up the wires up here before we feed it down, just like we brought it out, and then we'll just shove it back down in there. Now, this wire contraption has a it's kind of like just throw down in here, but anyways, it's got some like these that sit on the top of the studs on the valve cover. Now those have long since been broken on mine. This one here will hold it up, and if nothing else, you can get some zip ties, but that's one of the things that has to be removed in order to get this valve cover off, so be mindful of that. So I'm going to just work some stuff around. I still have not torqued these. I want to give the RTV the maximum amount of time to set up before I torque those down, and it goes to squishing out. So I'm just getting everything else that I need to get done, and those will go get torqued down last. You can see how much cleaner that front cover is. That looks a lot better. And the only other thing, like there is one more place this engine can leak, which would require you to pretty much rebuild it, and that's the bed plate. So that has remained to be seen, but I think that the majority, from what I could tell, is coming from the front cover. Okay, I've just been going through. I torqued down my valve covers. I just went 85 inch on those, And don't be surprised if there's not one of these things that's stripped, because they get them way too tight in the factory. And as soon as you take them loose, you'll have one that's stripped. I torqued down the front cover, went 18 foot-pounds on that. So we got all that torqued down. I think at this point we're going to go ahead and work on getting like our tensioner back in, and getting some other things here put back together. Okay, the pull packs are on. We've refastened some wires over here. We kind of got everything rerouted. I've got the cam and the crank sensor routed down there. Everything's torqued. I think we're going to go ahead and work on just getting the power steering pump back on, and we'll probably work on getting the crank on here after that. Okay, I'm just tightening those little 10 millimeters to 89 inch-pounds. The larger 13s that go up here will go about 18 on those. And so the next thing we're going to do, we'll get that pulley on here, and we'll go ahead and work on getting our crank pulley down there. Okay, so we're getting ready to put this back on. You can see I've got oil. In this case, I used some assembly lube there. Okay, so we're going to watch where the keyway is. So you see the keyway there. Keyway's on the bottom. Now I already put some silicone on this before, so I'm not going to worry with that. I'm just going to get it started into place. And I'm going to tap it on. I'm going to have to tap it down a little more with my rubber mallet so I can get that bolt started. Now I have used a longer bolt and simply got a washer and just pulled it down that way too. Okay, so we'll just start tapping this on. Now we'll check our bolt, see if we can get a few threads going. Not yet. Okay, and I got about 3 or 4 threads started there, so I'm just going to get my socket and pull it the rest of the way down. Now I could probably just tap it all the way down with the rubber mallet. It's not that difficult, but you just get it part of the way, and then I'll just pull it the rest of the way down with a bolt. And I'm just going to hit this with the impact. And I've never seen them go anywhere. Just going to finish snugging it on down. Okay, I'm getting ready to put this belt back on. Now, I had this stud in the wrong place, so do not put your stud back where I had it earlier. It's supposed to be the second one up, and I didn't realize it till I put the belt on. And I realized I'd had it in the wrong spot, so I wasn't paying attention when I stuck that in there, but have it the second one up, just like that. Okay, I've just set the intake back into place here and kind of slid it into this pipe here. And it's basically pretty straightforward. We just got to get our little hoses and everything back up here and get them reconnected. Pull everything back around where it was. And really not a whole lot to it, but I'm going to go ahead. Next thing, I'm going to just snug these down. I'm going to go like 85 inch-pounds on these. Alright, so let's go ahead and just snug these up. Okay, so we're going to get these back over here. Alright, so we just got to get this here fastened back down. This 8mm. Okay, so we just got these hoses back here to go on the back of the intake. Just going to give them a push on. And then we'll get our little clamps back up there as well. Okay, now over here we just got our little bolts to put back in. Now this one here bolts up to this, but this piece here also has a bolt goes through that. That helps hold those wires. But right now I'm just working on this EGR. Okay, so we'll just snug those down. Okay, so we got both of our, throttle and our idle reconnected here. We got all of our hoses clipped back there. Just kind of doing a double check over. And we're going to go ahead, I think, and get this piece back in. At this point, don't forget to put your transmission vent tube back in its little spot here as well. Okay, so all I got to do is tighten the bands, and we just slip that back on here. Now this one was already on the valve cover back there. It was already in place. So you want to make sure that that's there before you go to putting all this together. So other than tightening this up, we about got it right here. Okay, right now I'm just setting this mount back in place here. I'm going to get these 13 snug back down. Remember, you got to tighten your little 10mm for your lines that we had to take loose to be able to get to this back bolt. And as far as we just got to get the tube going over to the pump, the fill tube, and then of course we reconnect the high pressure line. But the overflow tank just sets on there. We'll just get those 10mm tightened back down. Right now I'm going to go ahead and snug down these 3 bolts in this mount here. Okay, we're going to go ahead and pop the fill tube back on. Unfortunately, I don't have my new tube yet, so I'm going to have to fight that thing back on there. Once we get that, we'll go ahead and get this part of the mount in place right here. Okay, so the hose is back on. Had to fight with it, but got it back on. Now we're going to go ahead and put this piece in here, and we'll get our bolts, get our ground, and then we'll work on reconnecting this high pressure line back over here. Just leave it out of the way for a minute. Okay, now we're just getting ready to tighten down these 18mm here. We just got all the bolts and the nuts in place, and once we get this, we'll get our ground on. Okay, we got our ground tightened up into place there. Okay, now we got our high pressure line. We just pulled it back over here, and we'll have to twist this part right here around so it will go on that bolt right there. Don't forget to go ahead and we'll get this started. Just start this by hand. Okay, so we got that reconnected, and of course we'll have to top the power steering fluid back off as well. Now also we're going to do an oil change before we ever crank this up. We're going to drain it out, get some fresh oil and everything in it, fresh new oil filter. Okay, next thing we want to do is go ahead and get this tire and everything back on here and get it snugged up, and then we'll go ahead and we can get the blocks out from under the engine there as well. Okay, so we got it cranked up and running here. I don't see any drips, but only time's going to tell how this is going to do, and I'll have to, post some updates. But I still got some bearing noise up here. I've replaced a lot of things on here. Still getting some noise from the bearings, I think, up here in this AC compressor now. But it seems to be running good and everything, so that's going to do it on fixing this oil leak on here. So it's been it hadn't been a bad project, just been getting the stuff together. We've had some bad weather and it's been really windy today and cold, but we got it done. So anyways, that's going to do it for the video. If you found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up. As always, I invite you to subscribe, and thanks for watching.